Welcome back to Austin Startup Week. I hope you enjoyed that networking break. Our next session is going to be about dual-use technology and artificial intelligence and how organizations like DIU and the Joint AI Center are creating a whole new investment thesis. I'm very pleased to introduce two speakers who I've gotten to know out on the road traveling around this DoDX ecosystem. Doug Drakeley is an Air Force colonel who leads industry outreach for the Joint AI Center out of Mountain View, California. Doug has, I think, been in the same role of sorts or a similar role of sorts for a couple of years between DIU and JAIC. But I mentioned the DIU because the Defense Innovation Unit practically invented the idea of dual-use technology. And now the JAIC, through the Joint Common Foundation, is going to assemble sort of the platform and the rules for how those technologies can live and be accessible across the DoD. I also want to introduce Ellen Chang. Ellen's the director of the Naval Portfolio with BMNT, which is an amazing company supporting innovation in the national security community. And it was started by another friend of mine and a recent Austin transplant by the name of Pete Newell. So Ellen's an investor, she's an advisor, she's an accelerator of companies focusing on the national security space. I met Ellen at an AFWorks Fusion event last June or July out in Vegas when we sat on another panel together talking about innovation ecosystems supporting national security. Well, thank y'all both for coming. I've been on the stage way too much today, so I'm just gonna pop off and let you guys talk about whatever y'all want to talk about.
Oh. Hey, Kevin, well, thanks obviously for the invitation to present. I was thinking back, it's been 1 year since General Shanahan and I were out to visit you in Dallas. And so that seems like so short ago, but so long ago, given all the changes that have taken place. But appreciate very much the opportunity to come speak and talk about what we're doing, both at the Defense Innovation Unit and especially my role at the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center.
Yeah, likewise, Kevin. Thanks for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here. Really excited about the Startup Week. Ironically, I live in San Diego, and San Diego is doing Startup Month right now, and hopefully being able to also learn about founding companies and accelerating them forward. So I guess how about Doug? We start off with introductions of ourselves, and then we'll get going on this conversation.
Yeah, sounds perfect.
Okay, so as you know, you have a little bit of a bio on me. My name's Ellen Chang, and I'm currently at BMNT. I'll just give you a really quick snapshot of my sordid history here. I joined the Navy through ROTC and had been active duty for some time before leaving after 8.5 years and joining essentially the banking industry. I pivoted out of the military and went into the commercial sector. Started my startup career, if you want to call it that, back in the dot-com boom-bust timeframe. And since then have been mixing my experiences, if you will, my career experiences between the startup world, which I currently am in. You know, BMNT is a pretty small company, as well as the larger prime. So I worked at JP Morgan, large bank. I worked at Northrop Grumman, large defense contractor. Over the last 5 years, mostly been in the startup world, accelerating companies. I founded an aerospace-focused accelerator along with another gal, Monica Jan, who's now at Virgin Orbit, looking and supporting aerospace-focused startups. So certainly in the dual use and certainly in the deep tech realm. And then now have pivoted that accelerator into an investment syndicate that has the same sort of mission. How do we actually build companies that are commercially minded, but also can serve the defense industry? And over to you, Doug.
Yeah, Ellen, that's a great summary of your background. I have a somewhat similar background. I actually started off as an Army officer, electronic warfare officer. But after a period of time, I joined the reserves. Ended up switching over to the Air Force Reserves, and then was in the intelligence career field in the Air Force Reserve. So I went to work for industry, worked for everything from a small family startup that turned into $1 billion corporation after a number of years. Worked at a small company with my wife. Worked with a small startup in Sacramento area, and then I found myself pulled back to the military full time. Around the end of 2008, when we were standing up some new capability for the Pacific Air Forces at Beale Air Force Base, and I found myself working full-time for the Air Force again. And from that time on, I've been full-time since then. So I've been back, but but that experience with industry was one of the reasons why General Shanahan ended up letting me have the opportunity to do this job here, working for the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. And my focus here is really outreach to industry of all sorts, everything from the large systems integrators and players like Northrop Grumman and other folks, all the way down to the small startup that's really trying to make things, trying to bring a product to life, their first product to life. So it's a slightly different focus than the Defense Innovation Unit. Defense Innovation Unit is really focused on bringing new, the commercial technology that's already in place into the DoD, working with DoD. So even though I'm located with DIU, we have similar parallel missions and things that we're trying to achieve. But the things that I get involved in sometimes, working with like a Northrop Grumman or other folks, is not always the focus of DIU. So hopefully that kind of explains some of the differences. But being located at DIU's headquarters in Silicon Valley has been tremendously useful, not only getting to know the large AI industry, but also having access to the startup focus and the venture capital market and all the folks who are in that area investing in AI.
Interesting. So I guess maybe we'll just kick it off this way, since we're kind of dueling on both sides of the fence here. Earlier, you were talking about JAIC's new program or potential program, I suppose, Trade Winds. And then we also started veering in towards how that's going to open up opportunities for startups as well as larger companies. I think that's what you mentioned. And potentially we can talk about how that opens up a public-private partnership and even reaches into how it fosters dual-use companies, just staying true to the theme here.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very excited about Project Trade Wind. We talked about it at the DoD AI Symposium last month and kind of kicked it off there. We're actually in the process of working with some of the 501Cs that responded back to our RFI, putting them together and kind of thinking about what's in the art of the possible. So we would like to create an AI ecosystem for acquisition that allows the OTA consortium process to allow us to acquire technology, both from everything from small to large industry, to academia, to things coming out of the academic environment, to potentially speeding the access of stuff coming out of labs into DoD. So again, being able to facilitate all the types of things that we're interested in. The JAIC is an operationalized organization. We need to operationalize AI for DoD needs. So taking this consortium, we're hoping to be able to build people, team people together inside of that organization, inside that consortium, and then be able to kind of deliver on the type of things that the JAIC and the DoD is interested in having in AI capabilities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess from an investor's perspective, I would be interested in knowing how some of those constructs could help a startup company. Sometimes these OTAs that I've seen are if you're a non-traditional, if you haven't done business with the DoD before, you may or may not understand the language. You don't even understand that there's this concept called OTA. And having you've been in Mountain View for some time, or at least in the Bay Area, I'm curious to see how you plan, how one could navigate those challenges.
So one of our plans, one of our RFIs is also out, is for a platform, for an acquisition platform or some type of platform to help just do that. So if you enter your information in as a company, here's what I have, here's the capabilities, here's the type of things that I'm doing, then you become accessible to all the other consortium members and also to the JAIC and other DoD. Actually, the consortium will be open to all DoD members. So you can actually then potentially see that capability in this on the platform, and then look to see if that if that's something that meets your needs, or if you need to partner that provider with another somebody else in the consortium and able to deliver fully on what your requirement is. We're very excited because we have not defined everything for Trade Wind yet. We want input from industry. We want input from the 501Cs. We want input from the platform managers. We want input from industry. Like, what would be ideal for them to, to be able to do like what you said is what, if I'm a startup, what's the mechanism that helps me do business with DoD most effectively? And is there an element of this? It's a coaching system. Is there an element of this? It's a fast track for ATO, for authority to operate and get your software up on a DoD network. Those are all things that we want to hear people give us ideas on how we can make all that happen.
That's a good point. I'm kind of watching what AFWorks is doing, and it seems like they've been experimenting quite a bit. They started off perhaps, well, suffice it to say, they just ran something called Engage Space, which I found was interesting because I'm not sure who the support contractors were behind the scenes, but they had everybody engaged. They brought in space coaches. I'm sure, whoever was running the real-time system allowed for the networking between more seasoned companies and maybe startup companies. And so just, it was interesting how they started to mix everybody to form those networks. And I was wondering if that's one of the concepts here too.
I believe it is. The real challenge I have is there's 71 innovation organizations in DoD. At least last time I ran the numbers, or somebody helped run the numbers for me. And it's just trying to coordinate all those efforts across the department. I think there'll be natural partners that'll come into the Tradewin, folks like SOCOM, other kind of early adopters who are very interested in helping us shape what Tradewin will become. I think, AFWorks, I love what they've done. It's, and Air Force Ventures and the things that are out there, NAVX, I stay connected with a number of these organizations, and it's all necessary at this particular time, I think, because we're just at the beginning of that AI journey. But at some point, it would be nice to be able to have a mechanism for coordinating our efforts. And that is just really, today something that is very tough. I think, having 71 different entry points for a company is just unrealistic.
Yeah, that's kind of hard. Maybe it's domain focused or something. I do have a question though, from an investor perspective. As we engage with the DoD, sometimes the IP and data rights are challenged. Especially with potentially the new AI constructs. Who owns the data, who doesn't own the data. Commercial sector has a different concept of the ownership. I'm curious where your head is, or where the JAIC's head is with.
Well, I think from a data perspective, if it's data that we have, we would own it if it's DoD data. And then, depending upon what kind of additional data we need, whether we buy rights to it, how we get rights to it, that would all be part of that transaction, and whether or not it's going to be, if it's obviously if it's publicly available information, those are things that we would be users of more so than owners of. But I also think the DoD data, it would be very unlikely that we would give up ownership rights of that. I do think there's opportunities here, though, and I would, I'm hopeful at some point that things like what I'm going to describe, which is Doug Drakeley's opinion, not the opinions of the department or the JAIC, but might happen. But think of the treasure trove of health data that the department has, right? We have these military records on folks, longevity, huge periods of time where we've checked people's health, routinely, and we've got all this information on them. And if we could somehow make that trove of data available to healthcare companies, right, and AI-focused healthcare companies in the United States, what potential insights could we gain from that? And is there a way to share that and, anonymize it, and obviously security and all the other things that have to go with that. But if there's a way for us to do that and make that a research database or an academic database that people could have access to, for me, that would be awesome. Now, there's lots of obstacles in the way of doing something like that within the department, but those are the types of things I think we should think about, those moonshot ideas from a data perspective. What's in the art of the possible?
That's interesting you bring that up, because I know that a couple of years ago, the VA actually was looking at that. Maybe not to openly expose data, everybody's personal health data as is, as a veteran, but to solicit volunteers into, I think they called it the 1 million veteran program or something.
Right.
But the healthcare, at the time I was working at a healthcare IT company, and we were quite interested. It wasn't like you wanted to know one specific person's essentially data. It was more, how do we actually get the information to be able to enable personalized medicine?
Right.
Which is really important.
Yeah, that might be another pathway from a volunteer standpoint. I'm thinking more, anonymized, completely anonymized data.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if there was some insight, there's millions of people who have signed up for 23andMe, right, because they're looking for some insight into something about their background or their health history that would be of interest, and that might be of interest to veterans also, or to people inside the VA. Yeah, I think again, there's a lot of things that from a data perspective, I think we would also be interested in, or is there a way to look at facilities management, right, and energy use and other things that are huge issues. And we own a lot of equipment, we own a lot of buildings, we own a lot of property.
Actually, it's interesting you bring that up, because I'm involved, as mentioned, I'm working with the Navy through BMNT in my role there, and taking my investor hat off and putting my BMNT hat on. It's interesting to see that what we're learning is, how do we pull that data, as you said. Some of the legacy systems, you have to actually retrofit other sensors in order to get the data off of some of these machines. Like, they have to put some sensors on them to generate vibrational data, and for you to actually detect mechanical issues. Another interesting challenge, which I'm actually looking for companies to invest in, is how do you make sense of sparse data? A lot of the current AI presumes that you can access a whole bunch of data in order to engender deep learning, et cetera. What about sparse data, since especially the Navy has very sparse data, under the underwater stuff? I mean, you might get a few blobology pictures here and there. I'm curious at your thoughts around that, or if you've encountered some of those issues.
One of the things that I find very interesting or challenging, I guess, is the department owns a lot of old equipment, or equipment that doesn't have sensors on it. And so is there a way for us to put sensors in the environments where they operate? And I've seen this happen in the oil and gas industry, where if you go look at instead of sensorizing every pump that's in the field, they sensorize the field, and then they're able to gather and make inferences about the health of those a particular pump based on the noise that is generated, or the smell that comes out of those areas. And I wonder if there's a way for us to think about doing that to get over the sparse data problem. Is there a way we could sensorize our motor pools or our flight lines and be able to, with all types of sensor equipment, everything from smelling, noise, LiDAR, visual, all types of sensors that we could put on there, and then from that make inferences based on that large volumes of data that would potentially be available.
Yeah, I think I love that idea. Bedgar and Steele from a different industry, they might have solved some of these problems before.
Right, and that's part of the challenge I have, is that I see I have an opportunity in this role to go see a lot of things that are being done across industry and across not only in the AI industry, but how companies are implementing AI within their commercial environments. And sometimes it's challenging, because I want the DoD to go faster and to do some of the things that industry are doing. But we, as you know, we have a different incentive system. We have we're not incented by profit, or we are incented to some extent on saving taxpayers' dollars and making sure we spend those effectively. But we're really incented on making a ready force, right, and making sure that we are able to complete the mission that we are assigned for the defense of the nation. So those are the metrics that we get measured on, and it's tough when you see what's in the art of the possible inside the different commercial areas, but they're being driven by a different set of metrics. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. How we might be able to change that dynamic.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I think it's probably just curiosity. In some of the environments that I'm working in, there's a diverse group of folks, even if they're Navy civilians or Navy officers, and I'll just talk my experience here. And they seem to be exploring different concepts that help enable them to move forward. So I'm thinking there's a lot of an innovative thinking going on. What I do see, the challenge is some of our security, maybe the DoD security approaches a little less forgiving, if you will, and you know, how do you create an environment where people can iterate really quickly, learn really quickly, without having to go through all the security certifications? That's the challenges that I'm seeing. And time is money, especially for if you're going to engage a startup who might have interesting technology to come bring to the table. They're they sometimes I work with investor groups like, I don't know if we want to get involved with the DoD because the cycle time is just not fast enough. Yeah.
Well, and that is the good news about folks like AppWorks and other places that are trying to increase the cycle time. I think we're trying to create that up inside of Tradewinds to do the same thing. I think the other mechanisms that we would look for, or the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center is trying to create, is a joint common foundation for AI across DoD, and that would speed up potentially speed up the ATO process, the security process, and we're partnering with the Air Force Platform One, Cloud One toolset, which includes Azure, AWS, and some of the other cloud providers, as a way to accelerate from concept to implementation. So as we build the Joint Common Foundation, that is the intent, is to help address some of those issues and help speed the onboarding of technology into the department, and care about and make sure we take care in the security and the other issues that have to be put into that. And we will do that in addition to the Tradewin mechanism that I talked about. We're also putting out 2 other multiple award contracts, one for data in the broad range of data capabilities, both from data acquisition through data management through the whole data lifecycle, and one on test and evaluation. So there'll be 2 multiple award contracts or schedules that people will be able to be on to be able to provide those services across DoD, and then there'll be the Drakeley ecosystem for OTA authority to move from prototype to production very quickly. And then that will be enabled by the Joint Common Foundation. So being able to have the platform, the AI platform, and that's not unusual from what you see in the commercial industry today. Many businesses build an AI platform to bring together their different business units or data from their different business units to be able to make differences about things that are important to their business.
Can you talk to the sizes of those different potential procurements, I suppose?
Well, I actually am not an acquisitions professional, so I can't really speak to the details on it. I know, there are different limitations on OTA authority than FAR-based authority. So, there will be at some point a limit, but, from talking to other consortium managers, usually it's, up to $500 million, right? So you've got a lot of leeway in there, depending upon how you construct the authority. And so, we're looking to have as much authority within that mechanism and use that. I don't see, at least today, I don't see very many projects that would exceed what would be available within OTA. I guess conceptually it is possible that if you're, obviously you wouldn't be able to buy an aircraft carrier underneath that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, those dollar amounts seem appropriate, for software data AI-ish types of endeavors. It's not exactly, like you said, buying some large space thing or some aircraft carrier.
Yeah, it looks like there's a little bit more kind of interest in the Joint Common Foundation. So yeah, the Joint Common Foundation, it is like I described, an AI platform. So it's everything from the tool sets that data scientists will use to create AI capability, algorithms, models, the things that we need to process that. It will be the data processing, so it'll include GPUs, TPUs, other things that we need to do data processing. It'll include the data storage, data management. Again, our intent is to put as much open source software into this platform as possible so that we can leverage the things that are happening in commercial industry, so that we can take advantage of those GitHub and the other things that are going on to keep software up to date. And then out the back end will come, inference systems or user interface systems that will be appropriate to where that application resides, right? So you would have a different inference system or a way to communicate to somebody inside, like a pilot who's getting data inside their aircraft versus someone in the Navy trying to do something in a ship. So figuring out those business intelligence systems and user interfaces is all part of the construct for the Joint Common Foundation, along with the open API system to allow it to communicate with other DoD systems. So I don't know. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah. Question in the chat. So for the audience, if you want to provide questions, we're open for them, and the team will promote them to us. I have a question on the Joint Common Foundation, though. What's the timing of everything we're talking about? I think it's already started, right? Because I'm working with a few.
It has. We chose Deloitte as a systems integrator for that platform, and we are well on the way. I know I was involved in an interview this week about the types of things that I was interested in, making sure from an industry perspective we're enabled on the Joint Common Foundation. So the things we talked about earlier, the ability to quickly move a commercial piece of software into production, making sure that it has the authority to operate, the security parameters, that it's not onerous on that business to try to get them to operate on the Joint Common Foundation. Those were all the things that I talked to the team about. And also to the extent that we enable the right kind of options for compute and think about things that we're already thinking about with data storage and the types of platforms for high performance computing that we're going to need in that environment.
Mm-hmm. What were the reasons you chose the consortium model? Just pulling from a question here.
Yeah, I think what we found was the challenges using the FAR-based model, and Will Roberts, our acquisition chief, speaks to this much more eloquently than I do. But the FAR-based model it has some tremendous challenges and limitations in trying to rapidly cycle through software acquisitions. So it's much more built around waterfall type acquisition of software. And that is not, as you know, not the way that AI works. So we needed to think about what other ways we could use. And in the meantime, the JAIC doesn't have acquisition authority today. So we've used all types of acquisition shops across the DoD, including DIU, to help us make the AI acquisitions that we've done so far.
Interesting. I'm looking for some other questions. One was actually talking about, I think, the value again. So it says, will the acquisitions be market value? And I'm not sure what that question really means.
Yeah, I think someone's trying to get to, as a DoD going to ask for huge discounts based on volume. And, again, we're looking for the most competitive capability to help us solve the problems. But I think there's a lot of flexibility, more flexibility inside of the OTA process than there is inside of the FAR process.
So really, I have a question here. I think Kevin advises companies that they should use DoDX prototyping funds to advance commercialization of their commercial products. And if it doesn't advance the product strategy, they should stay away from it. And asking me of my thoughts. And I completely agree. I think the challenge for some of the startups I work with is in engaging with DoD, especially with some of the grants, you almost, you can become what I like to say, a projects-based company versus a products-based company. And that starts to get dangerous because you become less scalable. You're not necessarily thinking about how to leverage a common vision to enable and leverage DoD funding perhaps to, as non-dilutive funding, to do your product development. You end up just doing project after project and you could stray away from what your overall vision is. And that's really, really challenging for a lot of investors. I think without thinking about where the commercial market is, which I personally believe the commercial market will push down cost, which then therefore the government can buy from. It's really hard. You can't keep up with the commercial world cycles. I was just talking to a good friend of mine who's with Engineering Capital, and he probably is an investor in many of these types of companies that could service the DoD. And I was asking him just about a space-based software company, and he was concerned about those product life cycles, which were probably maybe on the order of maybe 6 months to a year. He's used to doing with 3-month product life cycles. They're just going. And so, for those in the audience thinking about how you balance engagement, definitely think through those types of issues.
No, that's a great point. I think there's a lot of people thinking about that today, about how do we get software to a point where it's not 6 months to a year or longer before we get before we cycle through the acquisition of software.
I like actually the thought of low code and no code. I mean, I'm starting to hear some of those concepts, and if you actually had a product that was low code, no code, maybe it's at that commercial, TRL level 9 commercialized type of aspect level where the government user could just adopt it and start using it, and maybe there's some other models around that. It's the custom development approach that might be challenging. What are your thoughts?
What's interesting is I think as we see more, the more folks leave companies like Google, Uber, Microsoft, Netflix, go out and start solving some of those problems that they experienced there as they deployed AI with technologies that are low code, no code. And again, I know this is an overuse, but to democratize AI, right? I think that I'm beginning to see that there's folks out there who are leaving, places like Uber or places like Google and trying to solve those problems more so that you don't have to have a data scientist, babysit a system. And I think we'll continue to see that happen also.
I hope so. I mean, that's a couple of companies I've been looking at. How do you actually enable the training? Essentially, for some of the companies I'm working with, for them to survive, they have to solve that inherent problem. They need to design for their grandmother, if you will, not design for the engineer. And because even just technology aside, the decision maker needs to understand, this is on the commercial side now, the decision maker of a company that might actually buy a startup's capability you need to understand who you're selling to. And if you're selling to the engineer, you may or may not get to the point where you're selling to the decision maker who actually cuts the check. And so there's always this dynamic between, which archetype am I actually designing my system for in order to move my product into the marketplace. And I think that's not that different than in working within the DoD spectrum. What do you think, Doug? Yeah,
I think the idea of having, and this is, I've seen this, I think it was a headline in an article that came out today, the Army's going to have coders on the front line to help targeting. And I was thinking, is that really realistic? Is that if we mean by that, you're going to have somebody who uses a no code or a low code system to, maneuver things, that's probably realistic. But if I have to go in and, write some, Python code, right? Yeah, or JavaScript or something to target something on the battlefield, I'm in trouble, right? So I think that, and maybe it's just, the way we're phrasing and our terminology right now is not set right for how this is going to be deployed. But I look at it and goes, the tool sets that we give different people need to be designed for what their mission is, right? And so if I'm an infantryman on the ground in Iraq or in Afghanistan, I don't particularly want to be, going into a system and coding something for what I need to do to complete my mission. I want something delivered to me or a very easy user interface to help me do my job. And I think about, and again, maybe, my son spent some time in the Army, 82nd Airborne, spent some time in Iraq. And I think about like what tool sets they had to be able to do their job there. And I mean, we have to make it so that we've got an 18-year-old person, coming into the military who has that level of life experience and we're going to put them in a very dangerous, a very risky environment. We got to give them all the tools they need to be successful, and they can't be, in my opinion, again, this is Doug Drakeley's opinion, thinking about how do I go over here and code a bunch of stuff to accomplish my mission. So that simple, easy user interface is going to be critical. The iPhone type, iPad type environment is really what I think we need.
Maybe that's the test. You mentioned you have that test group, right? Maybe one of the requirements is adoption rate. One day. They better be trained up. No training required.
Exactly. Yeah, something that's easy. I mean, again, just having think of it. We obviously need to expand out the technical capability of the department also, and the workforce management issues of educating, people, everything from senior leaders on down to somebody who's on the front line. Educating them about how to use this capability is important, but that's going to be different for each one of those different levels.
I have a question around that. I was involved a little bit with the Navy Chief Learning Officer Initiative to inculcate emerging technologies into the Navy. Of all the emerging technologies, of course, AI was one of them. And one of the debates was, how does one educate senior officers around AI? What is it that you want them to learn? And I'm curious if the JAIC has thought of that. Is that a role that JAIC could actually subsume, given its expansive look across all the projects? What is it senior officers need to know? I don't think it's about coding, nor is it about how to do AI, right? It possibly is around decision-making around AI. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, and I think the JAIC is playing a role in that and trying to coordinate that type of education across the services and the COCOMs. We've done some workplace analysis studies and using Boston Consulting Group as an advisor on that. I think we're pretty close. But I would say the services, like the Naval Postgraduate School, has done a really good job about thinking about that issue and working with the Navy and the Marines. Thinking about those different levels and who needs to be educated on each one of those things. So I see a lot of work being done across the services also to get at exactly that issue. Is what does a senior leader need to know? And I think knowing what's in the art of the possible today with AI is one of the things that is important for folks to understand. I would not. There is no easy button for human decision making today, right? Now you can team systems and expert systems or machine learning systems with humans and get incredible outcomes today. But whether or not I want to be able to press a button and turn my war plan over to an AI system we're so far away from that. It just doesn't make sense. And so anybody who has that misperception, we need to quickly educate them, I guess, if that's
I think we have a question along these lines. It says, have y'all considered some of the upskill programs at Galvanize? They're helping execs at Fortune 100 companies lead AI adoption or teach them how to lead AI adoption within their organizations. Any thoughts around that?
No, I know. We've talked to a number of different providers who are out there offering education systems. I think some of the services have gone down the path of using certain platforms or other capability. I don't know I haven't seen Galvanize, but again, I'm always happy if someone wants to shoot me their contact information. Always happy to take a look. So.
I also see this as maybe it's not a thing. It's like how does one actually enact AI wargaming, for example, and basically a case study around decision making and exercising the thought process would go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of room in that. I think that's where the JAIC can play a role, right? It can start to think about those kind of problems and those kind of issues. And we have talked to a lot of the folks in the modeling, simulation, and gaming industry, which I think has made huge strides in that area. But even in that area, there's systems that solve for particular pieces of things, but not kind of the whole type of wargaming thing that we usually in the DoD, try to put our folks through in a gaming experience or in an exercise experience. We want folks to go through the full realm of planning and decision making. And there's pieces today that do that very, very well that can be used for that, but kind of a comprehensive system, we're still not there yet.
What I find interesting, you just brought up, you reminded me of a company that one of our angel groups had invested in probably 5 years ago. It was actually geared towards virtual reality. They were trying to figure out the headset, but the secret sauce behind them was that they were making the, I guess, objects within the virtual reality program intelligent. They were trying to infuse them with AI so that over time they would be more and more realistic. And maybe that VR came and went a little bit. Maybe it's coming back up again because of the hardware and the challenge with the headset. But that might be interesting to try to stimulate that thinking again. It was just, they were probably just too early because I think they're not doing that well as a company right now. But the thinking was, I think, very spot on.
Yeah, I think that, well, there is, augmented reality or virtual reality. There's training going on, at like literally the individual level, right? So you can train someone to utilize equipment, like a shoulder launched, anti-aircraft system. There's simulations out for that, that are being used by the services. And so I think those are all very useful tools. I think, like as we talked about modeling, gaming and simulation industry, one of the things that if you're playing an online game, you may or may not be playing against real people, right? Because if there's not enough real people, the system will generate, agents in the system to play against you. But if it generates a system, literally the system knows all the tricks, right? So it would generate an agent that would kill you every time, right? Or whatever the incentive is for the game. So you really they have to think about, like, how do we build a system where the agent, it's unperceptible to you as a player that you're playing against a computer, computer software. And that was really interesting to me to think about, like, how do we think about our our expert systems and our modeling and simulation, or potentially our exercise systems, in ways that we don't, we think about the adversary that we're actually going to face, right? And we make sure that we put that into the system correctly also, so that we don't end up with, training along lines that are unrealistic.
Yeah. Well, the Intel community, you're my background, right?
Yeah.
Do some reflection to get a sense of, hey, what are those guys up to? I do have an interesting thought to that, though. Lux Capital is a company based in the Bay Area. I don't know if you know Lux Capital, but one of them, I know Shaheen Farshizi, and he's invested in this company that's drone gaming or combat drones. They basically bring people in and they're doing a race around the track. And I found that interesting because the people that were actually doing the racing were getting trained on how to interact with each other, or think about how these semi-autonomous systems that they were managing were interacting with each other. So it was a hybridized type of environment.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts about that are.
Well, I think there's lots of stuff going on inside of that drone. I know DARPA did some testing along those lines a couple of years ago, and there's just some amazing technology that's coming out there. And I did notice that the Air Force, kind of thinking about where they're going to go in the future, potentially pairing UAVs with F-35s and F-22s as just part of a normal way that you deploy a squadron. And then, again, I remember seeing that like 10 years ago on Popular Science, right? Kind of this was the future, and now, here we are. And
here we are, yeah. Interesting. There's this one question we have up here. I'm not sure I can truly answer it, but is there a single place where startups can go to figure out how to navigate the defense space and to opportunities well suited for their technologies? That to me sounds like an AI agent.
Well, yeah, and hopefully if we get Tradewin right, it'll provide some of that, at least for folks who are looking to provide AI services. So, but yeah, unfortunately today there's not, right? I mean, I think about how many different contracting systems there are out there, even like where we publish, what we need, and you've got GSA and beta.sam.gov, and all these. And DIU publishes theirs on their own website. As a commercial service offering off their own website. The JAIC is used probably at least 20 different providers, contract offices, and each one of those contract offices may have a different way of publishing their needs. It sounds like a great business opportunity for someone.
They're trying. I mean, I know of this site called Defense Innovation Marketplace.mil. And they try to aggregate, and then the DoD SBIR site tries to aggregate everybody's, but it seems to me it's all endemic on, the JAIC posting their thing wherever. And I don't know. It's a hard.
Ellen, I'd be interested in your thoughts on, you mentioned the SBIR process and, your thoughts on that when companies are getting funding through that process. What have you seen?
What have I seen? It's interesting. If you look at across all the agencies and all the domains, if you're a life sciences company and you get an SBIR from NIH or something, that's for that genre of an investor, that's a feather in the cap. It's definitely, hey, the science is proven, it's well peer reviewed, and it's good. Within kind of deep tech, I'm going to lump DoD-ish types of companies into the commercial world. We call it deep tech or frontier tech. It's mixed. You'll have the folks who understand the DoD world who might actually invest. But I've had a space company back in 2015, it's phase 4. They were flat out told that we're not going to invest in you because you have a DARPA contract. The concern was not that DARPA was actually funding them to the tune of $1 million, almost $2 million to burn down the technology. It was they were concerned about the life cycle, the culture that would bring, because they just don't see the fast, agile behavior that's built up. And that's unfair to the company, but it's because there is this cottage industry of folks that have built up companies around project after project after project. And the system itself doesn't force the transition. It needs to change. I know Congress complains about it all the time, but in it, I guess we're not, we still keep it around, and we're not necessarily penalizing the poor application of the SBIR program, supposedly.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I find the challenge is the volume of people who have SBIRs who are coming and saying we want to work with you is just huge, and the actual ability or even time for folks to work with them doesn't match up, right?
Yeah, it doesn't match up, that whole mentorship thing. Yeah. I also found an interesting, this is not necessary to the program, but if the department continues to have the same problem again and again, year after year, I feel like the same requirement, the same SBIR topic maybe comes out cycle after cycle. It's just a little bit different. And I'm very curious what happens to all the projects. Yeah. Certainly I follow those that I know of, but it's at a system level, it's a challenge that we need to kind of think through.
Yeah, no, I think there, along with the entry points for the innovation system and other things that all good challenges for us to continue to focus on.
Yep. I think Kevin's coming back on.
Yeah, I think we went much faster than I thought it was going to go. So you've been a very interesting person to talk with. So.
Thank you. Likewise. Hey, Kevin.
Howdy. Yeah, that was a great conversation. So much to pull through that. I mean, I really think the transition problem, obviously, it's been a theme of several of the sessions today. It's been a theme of this year. When I look at, because we work with DIU, and we work with Army Applications Lab, and we work with AFWorks, and our companies are working with all of them. And when I look at the differences in how they're organized, they're all kind of organized in a way that touches that problem in a different way. I mean, I love the Army's model that they hook everything that they're doing through the Applications Lab anyway, and some of these X-Tech challenges as well, directly into a program. So that way, if it works, it's automatically transitioned, right? That doesn't necessarily mean whatever that thing is palmed, for that year. So there may be a little bit of a valley, but as long as you've got the hook into the program, you can wait a year for the money to catch up, right? You can cover that with investment capital or whatever. you know, I don't think on the SBIR side for the Air Force that they've really got that tied to program yet. But I would love for them to convince me otherwise. You know, the DIU model does the same thing. It starts with program, but it's limited by, you know, starting with a commercial dual use product. And just the fact that they can only build so many of those pipelines for individual products in any given year, right? But anyway, thank you guys so much for coming. It was really good to see y'all again. It was great to hear y'all chatting with each other, and I know that our community has really benefited from this talk. And to the community, it's time to transition once again to networking and Hopin. So to network with other attendees, just as you've been doing before, press the icon on the left-hand side of your screen that says networking. You're going to be randomly paired with another attendee. You'll have 5 minutes to chat. And if you want to continue the conversation with that individual, you should both click the connect button. You'll get an email that connects you both together. Other than that, go hit the networking, and I will see y'all in about 10 minutes when we have our awesome startup showcase with my good friend Cullen Jones of Microsoft.